Awesome. Good evening. If you guys would like to please turn to Luke chapter 13. We're going to be continuing today the story of Jesus going on chronologically. And you'll catch up with me here, but it talks about in verse 22, it says, "Then Jesus went throughout the towns and villages, teaching as he made his way to Jerusalem." You know, it continues on with the story of Jesus, saying that he's starting to again embrace his teacher role. But it got me thinking about what kind of teacher would Jesus be? See, my name is Sean, and I'm going to be teaching about what kind of teacher Jesus really is. See, I know we've all had a lot of different teachers in our lives. We've had the teachers that we've kind of just come to know and forget. We've had teachers that have inspired us and called us higher to goals to reach for them. And we've also had teachers that we were somewhat scared to talk to. See, we would all love to assume that Jesus was that type of teacher that would just encourage us, inspire us. But most oftentimes than not, he was actually that teacher that we can be scared of. And if I asked you, if you had one question that you can ask God, what would it be? The teacher roaming around. You know, you think about, wow, asking God one question. The only person in the entire universe that knows everything in all time and in all being. Some of you might want to ask him, you know, some phenomenons in the world. How were the Egyptian pyramids built, God? What about this Bermuda Triangle? I have no idea what this is. Is the Illuminati real, God? I just don't know what's going on here. Maybe you want to ask him some personal questions. God, why did this happen to me in my life? God, I saw a loved one go through suffering. Father, why did that happen? Maybe it gets really personal. You say, God, 5 years ago, I couldn't find my sock that one day. God, where was it? I looked everywhere that day. Where was it? That's Monica. It was behind the couch, you know, whatever, however God does it, right? Or maybe you would be tempted to ask him one of those questions that you aren't really sure you want to know the answer to. Maybe you'd be tempted, God, when will I die? God, do you see me as a true son of yours? God, what sin in my heart will keep me from heaven? See, as we continue this story here with Jesus, we're going to encounter somebody who asked one of those types of questions. A question that I don't know if this guy really wanted the answer that Jesus was going to give him. My title today is Who Will Go to Heaven? Point number 1, once saved, not always saved. Let's read verse 23. It says, "Then someone asked him, 'Lord, are only a few people going to be saved?' He said to them, 'Make every effort to enter through the narrow door. Because many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not be able to.'" See, here we find Jesus, as it says before, that he was making his way to Jerusalem. So we can already assume that he's going through the Jewish nation at this point. So more than likely, he's already speaking to a Jew. Somebody at this point would be a God believer. And so I would assume that Jesus, his answer to this question would have really shocked this man. In the same way, I believe this same answer can shock many in churches today. When he asked them, it's just like, hey, aren't just a few going to be saved? Most people today in our society would assume Jesus said, hey, well, if you just believe in me, it's all going to be fine for you. Don't worry, the door is going to be wide open. You just walk on through. Just give it a 2-knock, you're in. No, but that's not what Jesus says here. He instead lingers with this warning with him. And you hear what he says? He says, make every effort. He doesn't say, I'm not saying to them, I tell you. Make every effort. Give it your all of your ability. Because this is a fight that's going to be to the end. You're going to have to give it everything, because guess what? Many are going to come to the door and think it's just going to be wide open. That this guarantee is just going to be, I can come right in. But they're going to fail. Turn to Galatians chapter 6. It talks about here, yes, God gives us the promise of salvation. God gives us all these promises. But then there comes this word that sometimes we're not so familiar with. Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. He gives us this instruction. It says, hey, let us not become weary in doing good. For the proper time, we will reap a harvest. And we all wish that sentence just ended there. But it says, if. One of the greatest Bible studies you can ever do is just look up the word if. Look up that word if and see how many promises of God come up. He says, you're going to reap a harvest if what? If you do not give up. I want to ask you, what is your least favorite word? You know, I was asking a couple people in the congregation. My wife said her least favorite word was moist. She said she hates that. She said she hates that word. For me, growing up as a man, I always hated the word cute. I felt it just went against everything that I was taught to be. You know, if I'm lifting weights and somebody came up, oh, that's cute. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, it just wasn't a good word. But I came across this poet, and she was talking about her least favorite word was almost. Because it was a word that just talks about, it just represented failed possibility, potential. It represented our ability to just get right there but not be good enough. We almost made it. That as a humanity, we've come to the brink of something beautiful, but fell short so many times that they created a word for it. That we've almost made it. And I can relate to that word. Because, you know, we can almost pass the test. We can almost make it on time. Almost get the job. Almost fall in love with somebody. But I realized you don't want to almost make it to heaven. Like, man, you were right there, but you gave up. You made a lot of effort. You didn't make every effort, though. Like, wow. And I've seen a lot of people have that almost to heaven. What have I seen? For myself, I've been a Christian for the past 7 years. And in the same way Pete kind of had to get that maturity from God, I've seen people come and go as well. I've seen people where, you know, doing good became doing things. They forgot the good that God called them to do. And instead it just became a lot of do's and don'ts in the Bible. They forgot that the commands of God were to bring good to this world, not just duty. I've seen people leave because loving God became loving the church. Yes, the church is supposed to be the most loving place here on earth, but again, it's here on earth, so there's not other things to really compare it to. You know, the world doesn't have that great of love, so obviously we look like the shiniest star there's out there, right? But instead, like, people, they start loving church more than God, and so guess what? When somebody hurts them in church, they leave God now. Right. Oh, this can't be it. I got hurt. Somebody sinned against me. Of course. We never claim to be perfect. You know, this isn't something that we only rally as perfect people. No. We rally as people that just love God. I've seen people that contribution became a weekly bill. And the money that God has blessed you with supposedly just became theirs now. And it was difficult to give back to God. I've seen people where God's promises became disappointed expectations. That they loved God's promises more than God himself. And they were the ones that fell away quick. Because they thought that coming and becoming a Christian, they're going to be happy, they're going to have so much more money, have more friends. Yes, all these things can happen. But when they realized that there was going to be trials as well, they're like, God, I didn't expect this. God, I'm disappointed. And so they leave him. You know, it says that, there's a great saying out there. It says, the harder you work for something, the more you appreciate its success. And to be honest, guys, you're not going to work for harder anything else in your life than getting to heaven. You know, I've seen people work hard, and this is what I'm really proud of. You know, I have a great friend back in the States. His name is Garrett. And this man has gone through many, many trials. But I love getting with him every single time I go visit the States. Because, you know, he's had leaders fall away. He's had great friends fall away around him. But when I get with him, all he does is pull out the Bible and say, I love God. I'm like, man, this is somebody who doesn't just want to give up, but he wants to fight for his God. I remember there's this guy named Richie back in my old ministry back in California. And he was actually somebody who, when becoming a Christian, I didn't think he was going to make it. I looked at him, I was like, this guy isn't fired up, he's not doing anything. But slowly and steady, he just kept loving God. And every single time I get with him now, I just appreciate his love and genuine heart for God. I think about our good friend, I know there's a lot of people you may not know, but I think about our good friend Chi. You know, I love his story about how he had to struggle with his demons in his heart of like, man, I felt like falling away. I felt like not coming back because of discouragement and how Satan attacked me. But I see that he's kept holding on to the God that dream had for him, or that the dream that God had for him. And I look at him like, man, this is somebody I want to fight along with. See, with point number 1 of just, you know, once saved, not always saved, just because you walk through the door the first time doesn't mean it's going to be locked, not going to be locked when you come again. My first challenge is do not quit. See, when you become a Christian and you say Jesus is Lord, that is for life. It's the same thing when you get married. You know, you say for better or for worse. This is a lifelong decision. You know, and that's why I'm fired up even for later on today with David's baptism, you know? If you had a chance to meet David, he's a great young man. And we just talked to him earlier this morning about you becoming a Christian. It's not just here or for the next year, for even the next 5-10 years. It's for the rest of your life. And I said, hey, guess what? You're going to get tempted with doubt. You're going to get tempted with all these other things. Don't entertain them. Don't entertain them. Like you wouldn't get married and then think, oh, it's not going well, so let me just get divorced. Let me just get a new wife. No, it doesn't work that way. You wouldn't talk to your wife or to your husband, oh, I was discouraged and I was thinking about leaving you, but now I'm okay. Don't talk to God that way either. You know, don't have that disrespect to God. Don't entertain those feelings, those thoughts. No, God is your Lord for the rest of your life. Don't quit on God. He didn't quit on you when he was on the cross. Point number 2. It's not about what you do, but who you know. Let's continue on. See what Jesus says to this man who's asked that difficult question. He says, once the owner of the house gets up and closes the door, you will stand outside knocking and pleading, sir, open the door for us. But he will answer you, I don't know you, or where you come from. Then you will say, we ate and drank with you, and you taught in our streets. But he will reply, I don't know you, or where you come from. Away from me, all you evildoers. That was Luke 13:25-27. It talks about here that the main thing isn't just what you did, but does God know you? And you think about, you know, we always do that if we ever have people in our own lives that our own claim to fame, you know. I go around telling people like, yeah, if you know NBA, I'm like, yeah, James Harden, he went to my high school. You know, this person I knew before. Does this guy know me? Probably not, you know? It hurts my heart, but to say he does not remember Sean Valenzuela, you know? And it's the same thing. You wouldn't go to like the Academy Awards or the Golden Globe, say, let me get in. Why? I know Brad Pitt, like I know him. Does he know you? Well, that's not the point. Yes, it is. No, get out of here, you weirdo. You know, it's the same thing. Yeah, well, I know God. Does God know you? That is the real question. Too often people think that they're going to get to heaven just because of what they do. But Jesus here teaches, no, that's not the issue about what you do. It's about, do you know God? And even more precisely, does God know you? So, you have a lot of people say, well, I think I'm going to get there because I'm a good person. I don't do bad things. It's because I go to church every once in a while. It's because I love and provide for people in my family. I'm spiritual. I believe that there's a God. See, heaven was never created for good people, but for God's people.
Right.
And there's a big difference. It's God's house, and He will not let you in unless He knows you and knows you well. See, I want to ask you, do you know God, and does He know you? You can say, well, He's created everyone, and He's created me. Of course He knows everyone. He's created me, so how can He not know me, who I am? Also, yes, He did create you, but He did not craft you to be far from Him. Have you ever seen somebody after a long stretch of time and see them change, and you meet them again, and you're like, wow, I don't know this person anymore. The person who you were before, and now that they're different, I don't know that person. See, most of us start off God-made. God's created us and everything, but guess what? Later on, we become world-made. We become self-made. God doesn't know who we are anymore. He's like, I've created you in this image to get to know me, to get to love me, to stay close to me. Who are you living like now? I don't know you. That's not the person I created. No. I'm sorry. I had a heaven that was for a different person that was you, but not this one. This man here, no, I don't know this one. And it gets us to really ask the question, okay, then how do we get God to know us? That's a big question then, right? Well, turn to John chapter 15. There's this funny saying, it says, strangers think I'm quiet. My friends think I'm outgoing. My best friend knows I'm completely insane. You got to get to this friendship with God where He knows everything about you. And how does Jesus say He does this? It says, John 15, verse 15. This is Jesus speaking here to the disciples. He says, I no longer call you servants, no longer a stranger. Because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. Why? For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. I want to ask you, have you taken everything that has been known to you and start doing it in your life? Everything that you learned from the Bible, are you doing it and making it into your life? Look at it. Is it obvious to God and other people that He's the center of your life? That you treat Him as a good friend? How much time do you actually spend with God? And I'm not talking about religious events like church or Bible studies or anything. I'm talking about just you and God. You love your relationship with Him. A good question is, if there was a crowd of 1,000 people, would He be able to pick you out? Like, that one's my son right there. The one over there in the back, that's my daughter. I know her. She spends time with me. See here, getting to heaven, it's not about all the good things you guys are trying to do. There's no such thing as working our way to heaven. There's no such thing. We're not going to build a tower high enough to get there. The thing is, you got to know God personally. And the funny thing is, and the scary thing is that Jesus wasn't just speaking to people outside the church. He said, no, you. He was talking to the God's people, the Jews. He says, you got to make every effort. God needs to know you. Even with inside our church. Not do you come to every church meeting? Do you go out evangelistically? Do you know God? Are you close to God? Bible, guys. Find out who God is. If you're visiting for the very first time, we don't want you just to come to church and all these things. Yes, these are great benefits, but we want you to get to know God. Get with the person who invited you out. Ask those deep and hard questions about, what sin would keep me from heaven, God? God, who am I? Do you see me as a son and daughter? My final and last point is heaven will include everyone, but not just anyone. We're going to continue on in Luke chapter 13, verse 28 through 30. So Jesus keeps going on teaching this man. He says, there will be weeping there and gnashing of teeth when you see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all the prophets in the kingdom of God, but you yourselves will be thrown out. People will come from east, west, north, and south, and will take their places at the feast in the kingdom of God. Indeed, there are those who are last will be first, and first who will be last. So Jesus again continued preaching about what heaven's going to be like. He gives them this, kind of interpretation or picturing of Israel, but he also gives this image of a final feast. And he talks about it like the final feast is going to be like the kingdom of God with all people coming in and gathering. From the east, north, and west, it says everybody's going to be there. But he says not just anyone, though. So here he is talking to the Jews. And the Jews were supposed to be an example and God's evangelical tool that he was supposed to use to help convert other people. But they weren't doing it. They weren't doing what God wanted them to do. Why? Because they got in sin and selfishness. And they weren't achieving God's goal. So he started to say, hey, well, you're not doing what I want you to do. Guess what? I'm going to take the kingdom that was supposed to be yours, and I'm going to give it to everyone else. Those who actually appreciate the kingdom. Now think about the kingdom. I think about this world. What in this world has the potential to actually transform the world itself? I think that's a very small list with very few things on it. See, I'm not talking about bringing change to certain things. I'm talking about changing the foundation of the earth. I think about in American history, you have Abraham Lincoln who did something great, helped to abolish slavery, but yet, what about the slaves that are still currently in India right now? Okay, he brought change, rightly so, but not all over the world. Think about Nelson Mandela, fighting the apartheid in South Africa. Did something great and brave. Yet, he didn't change the feeling of racism or hate that still lingers in the world. I think about it. The only thing that has that potential to actually have this worldwide change is the unmovable, international, unified movement of God. It has the only change that can actually bring to this dying world. See, churches that just focus on this small little area or community are ruining the heart and promise of God. See, in Matthew 28, 18 through 20, he says, I have all authority in heaven and earth, and I'm going to tell you to go do something for me. He says, therefore, go and make disciples, not just of a little bit, your community, but of every nation, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. Jesus, his vision always to change the world, not to make these small community groups. So the church, what is it supposed to be? It's supposed to be this celebration of different nations, different types of people, that there should be no racism, nationalism in it, but yet we have a culture of ourselves. Now think about it. See, in the kingdom, we have a kingdom culture. We forgo our old cultures. I'm no longer American or Australian or anything. No, we have our own culture. We have a culture of everyone's better than ourselves. We have a culture about talking about difficult things. I think I even want to really lift up Dom, our German brother. He's taken it off to another level. It says that he came up to me. He's like, yeah, I started Googling, how do Nigerians talk to each other? And he started going around. He's like, yeah, so you got to ask about their mom, their dad, their brothers. And he started getting in. He's like, I don't want to be German anymore. I want to be what anybody else needs me to be. And this is what it's about, guys. Is that the only thing that has the potential to change this world is the kingdom. But I want to ask you, are you fully invested in the kingdom? See, church is not a thing you go to. It's a thing that you are a part of. Right. You don't attend a family. You're a part of a family. Yeah. It's the same thing with church. Are you just attending? Or are you really a brother and sister here? That makes a huge difference, guys. Right. He says, I've made you my friends. See, those that are going to enter God's house are going to be his family, not just his strangers outside the world. So in conclusion, guys, who's going to make it? To be honest, I don't know. Jesus teaches us here, not many. And he's not even saying not many in the world. He says not many in the people of God. He gives us this warning of make every effort. He tells us to make sure that we're family, that we know God. But it still leaves room in my heart of like, man, I'm imperfect. Even myself, I'm like, I don't know. But the only thing that you can do is promise to yourself and to God, God, I'm going to make every single effort. God, I'm not going to stop crawling my way until that door is finally closed. Have you promised yourself that? Or do you still have a back door? And with that, let's all make every effort to get to heaven. Hopefully I'll see you there one day. And to God be the glory.